Welcome to the Multiverse. It's Thursday, February the 13th. This is Mike.
And I'm Dave. Welcome to the Multiverse. We've got a special guest today that we're super excited about having on the show. It's Mr. Mike Fiorito. Welcome to the Multiverse.
Tell us about yourself, Mike.
Hey, guys! Thank you so much, Mike and Dave. Great to be here in the multiverse. So I'm a writer. I teach English composition at the City University of New York. I'm a journalist, and I kind of juggle all of these things all at once.
You're a music journalist.
I do a lot of music journalism. So the journalism has kind of. I wrote for a newspaper, a Brooklyn newspaper, and I would literally do like restaurant reviews even. I did everything. And then I started to do interviews, and the newspaper was good enough to let me kind of choose my topic. So I would go on theme because that's how my brain works. So for instance, and I'll get back to the journalism question, I did interviews with indigenous artists around the country. Mm-hmm. And they gave me the privilege of telling me their story, where they were from, what language they spoke, if they spoke an indigenous language, their history, their connection to their ancestry. Super interesting. Then I also was doing music interviews. So I would go, I don't call myself a critic. I'm more of an enthusiast. If I don't like something, I don't review it. It's just not my style. But I was broadly doing all kinds of, I would say, culture reviews, even book reviews, literature reviews, poetry reviews, and then at some point because you can only do so much.
Yep.
Did we lose him?
We're having some freezing here. Internet, come on, internet.
Did my internet drop?
Right after poetry and sort of general reviews.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't say too much, but I can pick up from there. And so I in the meantime, I was also writing books. So I have, I think it's about 7 books, and they really span subject matter.
Okay.
I did some writing on my Italian American background. It was interesting. It kind of started as comedy writing, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And then I found I got kind of serious too. So I have books that are kind of collections of stories and essays. Then I put out a book called Falling from Trees, which won an Independent Press Award. And this was a mix of like speculative fiction. So, what is the future of human sentience? What is the potential evolution on Earth, dealing with climate change, and kind of exploring the limits of science and also the veracity of science. So, a kind of, I would say, equal look at the virtues and benefits of science, but also let's pin down and explore what those limits are. And, ironically, writing that book, I finished the book. And when you're a writer, at least I am, my process is I go and I kind of hungrily look for the next subject matter.
Okay.
And I came across Jeff Kripal's The Flip.
Yep.
Now, when you write a book, you've written a book, it takes like a year and a half or 2 years before the book actually gets published. So that book came out, let's say 22 something, but I'd finished it in like, I don't know, let's say mid 220s. I don't recall. And I read Jeff Kripal's The Flip, and it just blew my mind. That really began this other. I had always been interested in, I would say at first, to be honest, science fiction. I'd always been interested in the idea of non-human intelligence, but I hadn't found the right hook. I hadn't found the right materials. I hadn't found the right story, like most people in the mainstream. And that's not to put people down. It takes a good amount of reading and thinking to find a path into this subject that is sober, is intellectually rigorous and interesting, combines a lot of subject matter, and is highly important. It just, there's, I think we've gotten to a different place currently where there's been more proliferation and more exposure of these ideas. I mean, even with the recent like drone thing, although it gets it becomes silly in a way.
Yes, and thankfully so. And we're trying to be a part of that in order to steer away from the silliness. I mean, yes, we're going to talk about that type of stuff, but it's good that it's becoming part of the common conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And all I wanted to say is that kind of led me to, I was thinking about writing about communicating with Jeff Kripal, with Diana Pasulka. They actually wrote blurbs there on the cover of my book, For All We Know, which came out last year. And because I'm a wood chopper, busy at my craft, I was working readily on my next book, which came out just this February. Actually, we're in February. It came out February 1st, St. Bridget's Day. And I think, like you said, just to sort of, after that introduction, what really interested me is I studied philosophy undergrad, and you study something called, you may study something called philosophy of mind or philosophy of science. They're separate, separate classes. And it seems some materialist thinking people might be offended by that notion. Oh, come on, philosophy? You're going to tell me as a scientist, what I know, and you're going to question the truth and the power of empirical science?
You're right. At that,
and my answer to that is yes.
Yeah, there's some antagonism at that interface, but it takes very smart people on both sides of that interface to get there.
And some open-mindedness,
Exactly.
and some willingness to, accept influence from outside, is important there.
Exactly. And I always feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of really smart people. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a writer, and a writer is, you could be, you don't have to be a genius to be a writer. Okay. You work hard at your craft. You're maybe good with words. You're interested in sounds and poetry. So, I realize that I'm not making any great claims on that, but just as an example, guys, there's a book called, Is Evolution a Social Construct? Right. And it's written by this philosopher, Michael Ruse. Now, he was not saying, this book has got to be 20 years old. He's not saying that evolution is not valid. It's not what he's saying. What he's saying, he looks at different scientists, and he looks at where they're coming from and how their context influenced the way that they looked at evolution. So, for example, Darwin wrote his work during the British Industrial Revolution, and it had a very particular kind of tooth and nail aspect to it. And then you take someone like Lynn Margulis. Lynn Margulis was married to Carl Sagan for a period, and she was really an innovator. She had completely new ideas, along with was it Jim Lovelock? I think his name was James Lovelock, the Gaia theory, and she had this notion of coevolution. So her kind of hippie, maybe you'd call it. The way Michael Ruse writes about it is where she was coming from intellectually and from the context of the culture and what was important to her, that influenced the way she looked at evolution. And if I could just conclude by saying that she was kind of scoffed at. So this idea that ecosystems co-evolve, right? So that the soil, the insects, and the plants in that ecosystem, and the animals, they kind of work, not that they're consciously working together, but they're feeding off of each other to take advantage of the benefits and also the weaknesses that each offer. I think this is more of the view today. But the point is that philosophy of science it examines bias. I guess is what you'd say.
Yeah, very cool. So we obviously we want to talk about your book. I wanted to shout out Society for UAP Studies today because Dr. Engels did. Yeah, they did a really good show that I listened to with you on it, and so I just wanted to recommend that to any of our listeners. But at one point we're talking about bluegrass and we're talking about UFOs at the same time, and I'm like, tonight's going to be an awesome interview. So we're really looking forward to connecting those dots for our audience tonight. So
and I have to admit, I got the Society for UAP Studies a little bit confused with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. That's a slightly different group, obviously about the same topic, but it's always good to find another channel that provides that information, which is great.
Yeah, and they offer courses, and Kim is teaching a course right now, which is awesome. It's kind of connecting UAP to shamanism.
Very cool.
And I'm taking the course. It's great. And but yeah, bluegrass. I mean, it could be any music. Are you guys bluegrass fans by any chance?
So I
enjoy
know
it, but I'm not knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually went to a festival called the Bluegrass Festival when I was like 9 years old. That was my first introduction to that. It was a huge festival in Nova Scotia, Canada, where just everyone was camping. There was music, there was partying. It was a good time. As far as I remember, I was 9.
Yeah, it's a very particular kind of music, and I do understand. I mean, I tend to get interested in niche subjects. So as you talked about in the introduction of some of the books I've written, I certainly don't go after, I'm not trying to write the bestseller, the numbers reflect that too. I go after subject matter that I truly love, and I become wildly fascinated, and I dig into it, exploring, reading, writing about it. And so I've long been a bluegrass fan. You would say, from New York? How did you become a bluegrass fan? But we had a Columbia University had a bluegrass station, and it kind of ekes through the culture anyway, and things like hee haw, if you guys remember.
I do, yeah, I do.
It was like it was a kind of almost a mocking presentation of, it was kind of presenting hillbilly culture in a way, in a kind of mocking way, but they had some amazing musicians on. They had great musicians, and it was funny in its way, and just in various ways, bluegrass ekes through the culture. But I guess to say in short, and I'm not trying to sell bluegrass to anyone. I do understand. It's a music of, it's got deep history. It's a kind of composite of many kinds of music. Of gospel, old time music, of course, blues. Bill Monroe, who invented bluegrass, he said, if I hadn't invented bluegrass, I'd have made a fine blues player. That's according to him.
Very
you
cool.
You also have the virtuosity of the instruments. So there's the speed, and Bill Monroe, when he crafted the idea, because he singularly kind of created. Yeah, it's very technical. I played with in New York. They used to have this bluegrass kind of ensemble, open mic, and I went down to play. And when you get the nod, you got like 2 seconds, and if you don't jump in and they move on.
That's right.
But I think I was always attracted, to that complexity, that the interesting complexity and the harmonies between the players and the timing, and also that great singing. The harmony parts. You think it's in there. You could maybe even draw a line that from bluegrass, you get the Everly Brothers, and you get the Beatles, and you get this kind of love of 3-part harmonies, which sadly is not such a thing at the moment in popular music. But
the Eagles, the Allman Brothers,
that's another
popular music today.
Exactly
about it, but as a music lover myself, I always find it interesting to kind of create those own charts in my head of, hey, this sounds like this. And then I go and make sure what year did it come out, who sort of got to that sound first. Whereas, okay, 3 or 4 years earlier,
Right.
so-and-so did a very similar thing that was new at that time. And it's just so fun to trace the lineage and evolution of musical concepts like that as an enjoyer myself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super fascinated by that, to unpack like the Delta blues or whatever great music form. It's usually there's someone that comes along that kind of it really typifies and becomes the icon of that style, like Hank Williams, playing honky tonk music, and so on. There's someone that comes along and really crystallizes and becomes the embodiment that we know of as that music.
It sounds like you're very passionate about music, just even talking about it. I know you've written about it a lot.
Ask you a music question. This is sort of a Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you there?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I hear you. Yeah.
I was sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. This is sort of a metaphysical, philosophical idea question with regards to music. Do you think there are some ideas that are out there that are waiting for somebody to get to them first? And if so-and-so hadn't got to it first in 1983, then somebody was already about to get to it in 1982, and then somebody else would have gotten to it right after that. But the idea itself, like playing 28 of the same note in a row in the same style, but maybe it's with a new tone or a new, style like that. Do you think the ideas are out there and people have to get to them first?
See, I kind of, it's an interesting, and I think it's probably a debate that goes back to, it does go back to Plato. And I'm kind of the opinion that culture is co-created, and because it does depend on context. It depends on the culture, I think, and these are my opinions: the culture, the time, the context, the technology. So, for instance, Beethoven, he played a piano that had pedals, and so the pianoforte. And because it wasn't like a harpsichord that kind of had this staccato, ding, ding, dong, 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 kind of one note without a resonating quality. He could play these contemplative pieces. He could play the Moonlight Sonata and kind of do these rolls and bum, da, 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 bum, and have these dramatic pauses. So I think that's true with actually everything, even science. It's not that it's necessarily. I mean, it's out there to be discovered, but I don't believe. I think that we discover it with the cultural context of the time, and in fact, I think that the complete understanding of science is perhaps unknowable. Because we have limited perceptions, we have limited intelligence. Our science is derivative of our 10-digit. It's interesting that we have a decimal system, right? We have 10 fingers, 2 eyes, and our science, I think, kind of it reflects even the physicality of our bodies. Not to mention that we're thinking creatures on a planet with oceans and skies and mountains. And so that's just my opinion.
Almost like science itself, the totality of science is an enormous symphony with so many different voices. And we're actually only hearing a few different instruments in a few different ranges. And we may not even be aware of rhythms that are going on in different parts of the universe, different frequencies, dimensions.
Exactly. And then you have a science revolution come along, and suddenly everything we thought was something is now not. It's maybe true in a smaller context. Like Newtonian mathematics was true, and it's still true in a limited context, but it doesn't work for, quantum physics. It doesn't work in. It has a limited, but still valuable applicability. I think Mike had a question, right? Right, Mike?
Say what?
Your headset went out or something like that?
Who, me?
Go ahead.
I forgot what it was anyway, and you guys, I was just paying attention to you guys after that. But I just was just thinking to myself about what you guys are talking about, and how we are our individual experiences, and all of us have individual experiences, right? So that's a huge factor as well. Like, you could be the smartest guy in the world, or you could be the most musical gifted person in the world, but if you're dealing with an environmental factor that's disrupting you, for example, breaking your arm, or poverty, or something like that, chronic pain, anything like that, your receiver isn't necessarily as tuned into the creative part of the universe as it could be.
Mhm.
And so I often think about how the most creative I've ever been is when I've been functioning in like the most healthy, right? I'm getting the best sleep. I'm exercising. I'm eating healthy, and so it just makes me think about how that plays a role in how we how we perceive the universe, and we perceive music and everything else in it.
Absolutely, and I think I'm like you when my chi is flowing, when I'm like eating well, and and I'm a sort of fidgety person, a busy person, so I can't sit on my butt and do nothing. I have to be out there doing stuff.
Yeah,
I see Perceptions Today has a question there or something.
Yeah, he wanted us
hypnotic states, and it says can happen while driving. That's almost like, I think I've been in that zone. You have to have driven down. It's got to be like your commute or a very familiar drive, but you can get to that zone where the right part of your brain is mostly tuned into the radio, and the left side has its eye on the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I've been driving, where I say, where am I going now? And it's happened where I just say, well, I say to my wife, where are we going again? Now that's like scary, right? But it's momentary. It's a momentary flicker. And then I'm like, okay, that's right. We're going to, yes, the store or whatever.
I want to take a moment to shout out people in the chat. Looks like Mike's frozen again, but I would want to shout out some people in the chat. We got Perceptions Today watching, great friend of the show. He's got an awesome podcast. You can check it out. I think, Mike, you've done his podcast, correct?
Yes. Yeah, Perceptions Today. Am I back, guys?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Yes, you're here.
Awesome.
Also, Rebirth of the Word. I just wanted to read his. It's a big one, but he wrote an article about bluegrass and Black culture today for his website. You can find his website. It's rebirthoftheword.com. He said, trying to define Black culture would be one of the hardest things to do. And I say that because country music, though often associated with rural white Southern culture, has roots that can be traced back to the folk and Appalachian music traditions, which predate recorded country music. These traditions blended European settlers' ballads, fiddle tunes, and storytelling with African-American rhythms, creating a distinct sound that would evolve into country music. So I thought that was pretty insightful. Check out his website and him on X, guys, if you're watching. Rebirth of the Word's always dropping some knowledge on there. And who else we got in the chat?
And I love that point, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, if you want to comment on that.
I was just going to say, yeah, just that American music wouldn't be American music without that collision of cultures. And country music has blues in it. Blues has country, and it's been the record labels and the way it's been presented sort of focused it to a group, but to a demographic. But the music itself is inextricably. I mean, Elvis he came from that world. He definitely copied, but I think it was endemic to his tradition.
Yeah.
And also Perceptions Today, thank you for being here. I missed the podcast. I missed those great collections of people and personalities and great minds, and you're always in my thoughts.
Yeah, he's a great friend of the show, and we appreciate him very much too. I just wanted to shout out my mom. What's up, Mom? She's watching. Dawn from Ontario, and Sean from New York. Some of our regular watchers. We really appreciate the support, and we hope you guys enjoy the show tonight. You want to get into a little bit of global and solar weather before we get into Mike's book?
Yeah, but before we dig through your newest book, we like to do a little Earthwatch segment and or some science and astronomy news. So we're going to go to that really quick. And feel free to chime in as you look at some of this stuff.
Yeah, and also in the chat, let us know, where you're watching from. We always like good communication in the chat. If you're a fan of and you came Fiorito and you came here from one of his social medias, thank you so much for joining.
Yep. Welcome. Quick look at solar weather. Things are quiet coming from the sun today. You can see there aren't any big sunspots facing the Earth. A little bit of a coronal hole. There were some bigger coronal holes a few days ago. Scrolling down. Oh, this is from yesterday. Nothing much going on. Back on Monday, we had some minor geomagnetic activity due to the coronal holes facing the Earth, resulting in higher than usual solar wind flow. And I don't know if this doesn't have something to do with the enhanced geologic activity we see on the Earth.
That would make sense to me, but I don't want to bro science you guys on that. But I would assume that high solar activity affects the Earth's geology. So I don't know.
Yep.
What do you think?
I don't have a full presentation on it, but maybe that's something we'll explore in more detail later. There was earthquake activity in the Caribbean recently. 4 days ago, there was a 7.6 earthquake close to the Cayman Islands. Show that briefly. Epicenter was really right down in the middle of the ocean. And then also on that front, there's been geologic activity in the Mediterranean, swarm of earthquakes around Santorini Island in Greece. Let's go ahead and shift to the USGS page.
Yeah, the Greece one. Shout out to our friend of the channel, George Sakalaris. I know he's got family in Greece, so hopefully they're safe.
Here's earthquake by the Cayman Islands. And some more even over by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Scrolling over, we can also see the Mediterranean. Here's a cluster of earthquakes over by Greece.
I always ask every guest while they're going through this, Mike, have you ever experienced a earthquake?
I did. I was in California, and I think it was, let's say, 1989 or so, and I believe the epicenter was Eureka, California, which is north, and I was in Oakland, and I remember at 4 a.m. or so, there was this. I thought I kind of woke up, my heart beating. You know, when you wake up from a dream or something, and your heart's rapidly beating, and I thought that's what woke me up, but it didn't feel quite right. I looked at the clock just to kind of make a note, and I said, "Oh, 4 o'clock." Went back to sleep. Lo and behold, there was a pretty major earthquake. I think one of the levels of the Bay Bridge fell. So pretty severe, actually. Have you guys been in earthquakes too?
No, I personally have not. I was in San Francisco when one happened, like in the middle of the night, like in gosh, I'm blanking on where all the vineyards are north of San Francisco. But anyway, one happened there, and
Napa.
Yeah, there was one in Napa that was apparently pretty intense. And you could feel it in San Francisco, but I was asleep. I did want to, Brittany looked up for us if solar activity can cause earthquakes. And it said, according to current scientific understanding, solar storms do not directly cause earthquakes, while some studies have suggested a possible correlation between high solar activity and earthquake occurrence. The evidence is not conclusive, and most scientists believe the primary cause of earthquake remain tectonic plate movements, making a causal link between solar storms and earthquakes unlikely.
But what causes those tectonic plates to jiggle more rapidly than before, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be music. I feel the earth move under my feet.
That's what I was thinking. I actually had the thought while we were talking about the sun. Does the sun vibrate? Does it have a resonance?
I don't. Definitely, it's got to. It's big and it's round. If it's round, it's got a resonance, you know?
Yeah. I'd like that.
Even rocks vibrate. even rocks have vibrated frequency. So yeah, sure. And it's a big, gigantic nuclear,
I wonder, like, with the right instruments, what it would sound like, I guess is the question I'm asking. I wonder if Brittany can find that for us. Anyway, sorry, continue, Mike. Didn't mean to derail us.
No, I think it's cool. I think those are cool questions. It may sound something like Jimi Hendrix, or
yes,
I guess it depends on what you think. Or
I noticed in your interview with the last channel I mentioned, I'm forgetting who they are right now. The Society for UAP Studies. You did have a Jimi Hendrix on your wall, so that you got cool points in my book.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's the last thing I see before I go to bed, and it's like an old psychedelic poster. And in my guitar case, I have a little clip of a picture of Jimi Hendrix and Frank Sinatra. So my feeling is, if I could sing like Frank Sinatra and play like Jimmy, that's my goal.
Nice. Yep. I was thinking about it too. The sun probably sounds like Jimi Hendrix when it's having like a bad day, or not a bad day, but a hectic, more chaotic day. And then it probably sounds like, I don't know, Beethoven when everything's, smooth and working harmonious. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Bach. Beethoven's too busy. Yeah. Let's get Bach for the nice chorals.
I could just imagine though, those like Jimi Hendrix. There's a song Machine Gun, and he does these things where he's mimicking the sound of bombs dropping, and he's going, and maybe that's what it sounds like. But
that's when the Younger Dryas happened. Jimi Hendrix was just that's funny.
So imagine if 3 volcanoes went off at the same time and they made a chord, right? If there's one volcano going off, it's got to be resonating or rumbling at a certain frequency. Kilauea volcano has been spewing forth lava. I think they recorded a 300-foot lava splash the other day. Try to find a recent video, so I'm going to play this here briefly over from Hawaii.
A churning caldera of active lava that brightened the sky at night, diminished into a quiet landscape by day. The eruption of Kilauea paused Wednesday morning when the 9th episode of lava fountaining ended at 8:43 a.m. The entire episode lasted about 22 and a half hours. Before the episode began, inflation at the Kilauea summit increased during a 1-week pause in activity, until occasional spattering from the inactive vents was observed on the morning of February 11th. Lava began erupting from the vent that morning. Vigorous, sustained fountains reached heights of up to 330 feet and continued at lower heights overnight. New lava flows traveled approximately half a mile, or about a kilometer, across the caldera floor. About 13 microradians of deflationary tilt were recorded during the episode, but ground deformation switched to inflation as the vents shut down this morning. Scientists with the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the rapid change from deflation to inflation at the same time the eruption paused suggests another episode will take place. But they say there is not yet enough information to establish a likely time frame for the next episode to occur. For now, all activity remains confined to the summit caldera within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park.
Talk about resonance.
Yep. So there it is.
That's cool.
Before the show, I also pulled up the actual live tab, but I didn't know if anything would be happening. So I found a good footage from yesterday.
That was gorgeous. I mean, I'm sure it was terrifying. Yeah.
Also gorgeous. Yeah. It's amazing how some of the most violent the universe can be is almost the most beautiful a lot of times.
Unfortunately,
and how that. Yeah,
it appears quiet now. Fortunately,
that's good. Yeah,
it's sort of it let its rage out, and now it's resting.
Well, it has Jimi Hendrix moment.
last but not least on the earthquake front,
Mhm.
and this will be the end of the Earthwatch segment, but there was also a small earthquake recorded near Area 51 the other day. And I was actually checking in my phone earlier. Sources tell me that this was due to a battery of industrial document shredders, 650 horsepower document shredders that were being put into overdrive that were running so fast they actually blew a transformer out underground, had a chain reaction, blew up a turbine generator. It registered slightly on the Richter scale, but yeah, they're working fast and furious underneath the ground over there.
and
Cover a few things
Yeah,
up.
that's funny.
in the underground mine shaft.
Yeah, that too.
Oh, that's funny. That's good stuff.
That was all I had for Around the Globe. We like to keep an eye on what's going on the planet. You know, it's important.
Agreed. And I just wanted to take
Absolutely.
a quick break before my segment to say we got approximately 43 concurrent viewers right now. Thank you so much for joining, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, or what am I missing? YouTube, Instagram, where we should be live across all those platforms right now, which is super cool. So wherever you're watching from, thank you so much. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube. That really helps us out a lot. But wherever you're watching from, we appreciate it. And yeah, so Mike said we like to keep an eye on the Earth, what's happening on Earth. We also like to keep an eye on our cosmic environment. And so that's what I'm going to get into. Last week, I showed you guys, I talked about a newly discovered asteroid called it's called Asteroid 2024 YR4. And last week, the reporting of it was that it had a 1.8% chance of hitting Earth on December 22nd of 2032. I just wanted to report that they've upgraded that to over 2%, 2.1%, which is actually a lot in cosmically speaking. I'm going to show a couple of quick videos about it with a little bit of an update from somebody smarter than me about astronomy. Somebody we showed on the channel before, Mrs. Astro Alexandra. She's got a great channel, so we're going to put the link down below. But let me go ahead and share that and see what she has to say about Asteroid 2024 YR4. Boom. Share that. And let's go.
It sounds really scary, but it's gonna be okay. A couple of months ago, in December, astronomers discovered a new asteroid. It's called 2024 YR4, and of course, immediately they started calculating its chances of hitting Earth. And the math that they came to caused the International Asteroid Warning Network to issue its first ever asteroid impact warning notification. This asteroid is between 40 and 90 meters across, and it has between a 1.3 and a 1.6% chance of impacting Earth on December 22nd, 2032. So this is now officially the most hazardous asteroid that we know about in terms of impact probability and impact energy. Astronomers can see this asteroid right now, but unfortunately it is moving away from us right now, and so after April, it's going to get too far away and it's going to be really hard to study. So astronomers have until then to refine their calculations using every tool and telescope available to them. And the asteroid will become more visible again in the year 2028 with that potential impact in 2032. It is a very slim chance, but if it does impact, this is the area of uncertainty. The really good news is that we know about it. If calculations show that it's probably going to impact, there are things we can do, like steer it away from Earth. Scientists have successfully changed the course of an asteroid before. If it hits over the ocean, that would be okay. It's not big enough to cause worldwide tsunamis. If it hit over land, there would be blast damage up to 50 kilometers away. So we're talking about downed trees, broken windows, and maybe some collapsed buildings, so it is absolutely dangerous, but definitely not like dinosaur level. But again, it probably will not get to that point. It has more than a 98% chance of missing Earth, and hopefully we can refine those calculations even more over the next couple of months.
So that's I guess the last I read literally today was that it was 2.1% chance, but it's definitely it's definitely the one that they're looking at the most, to the point where they diverted resources from the James Webb Telescope in an emergency move to start studying this thing during this time leading into April. I wanted to show another quick video, a short video about what the James Webb Telescope will do while it's while it's examining it. So let's check that out. So this is what the James Webb Telescope can do, and what it will try to do for us before April, so we can get
James
more
Webb
info.
Telescope, famous for snapping some of the prettiest pics across the galaxy, is taking on a new space case, helping protect the Earth from a potential asteroid strike. It's something the world's space agencies are taking very seriously. For context, NASA is monitoring asteroid 2024 YR4, which according to science experts has a 2.3% chance of hitting our planet on December 22nd, 2032. YR4 is estimated to be 130 to 300 feet across, roughly the same size as a meteor that exploded over Russia in 2013, injuring about 1,000 people and damaging 3,000 buildings. It's enough of a concern for astronomers to take humanity's best above the atmosphere tool, the James Webb Telescope, in an effort to study this rogue rock. Webb has the ability to capture infrared light emitted by the asteroid, which can help give us clues to its true size and orbit, providing more evidence as to whether the comet could collide with Earth. They'll have to work quickly. YR4 will disappear from Earth's view in a few short months, traveling around the sun before reappearing in 2028. Speaking of disappearing, a painting vanished for a century only to be discovered hiding.
So I did want to address a question in the chat. And Dante says, "Wouldn't this qualify as fear mongering?" Heard this story over and over again. It depends on how you look at it. I haven't heard this story over and over again. This was new to me this week, in the last 2 weeks, and that's why I was sharing it. But also, I don't think it's fear mongering to just pay attention to what's in your cosmic environment. I think it's responsible, and it's nice to know that, like, it's not a world killer, but that it could have a chance to hit the Earth. I personally like to know that. What do you guys think?
I'm fascinated by that stuff. Yeah, just when you think of just some data, that like the sun takes 250 million years to orbit the Milky Way. That's kind of
right.
Such a crazy number. That the Milky Way is about 100,000 light years across and 1,000 light years thick. I mean, that's just kind of amazing stuff. And I think we believe that with the James Webb Telescope, and that our star is just one of 200 billion stars in the Milky Way. And they think that there are possibly 3.2 trillion planets in our galaxy. So, and this is just with the tools we have, with the paradigms we have today. I mean, who knows what those real numbers are, but I'm always fascinated by those scientific details.
That's what that James Webb is still only picking up on, like 3 or 4 instruments out of this vast symphony that we can actually decode what they're playing.
Sure, exactly. And Graham Hancock talks about comets and asteroid impacts a lot, and some people say that he fear mongers as well. I suppose it depends on how you look at it, and I do appreciate the comment, Piano and Dante, but that is not my intention to fear monger. I just think this stuff's cool and badass, so I'm going to keep showing a couple different angles of it as we get into it.
If anything, we're hope mongering. We hope. We're trying to spread hope. This is a hope mongering type of show.
Exactly. And so I'm going to head over to NASA's Eyes on Asteroids site, because I just want to. She mentioned the orbital plane of this thing is 3.99 years. So I just want you guys to be able to see that orbit that she's talking about. So I'm going to speed it way up. It's a 4-year orbit. So this is why they're trying to get to it now. So it's just basically heading away from Earth at this time. And so it takes 4 years on this clock for it to circle back around into dangerous territory. And so I just thought this was sort of a cool angle of the orbit. I wanted to show it. Here it comes swinging back around. It's so according to NASA, there's a lot. Their estimate is 57.35. They were saying 30 to 150 or something. So they really need to learn more about this thing, and I'm curious to see what they find out. The next thing I'm going to share is I lined up a really cool shot of this thing's approach. So we'll check that out. You can see 2024 YR4 right in the view here, and there's Earth in the distance. This is a couple of days before potential the 2% chance. So we're gonna go ahead and speed that up. I just like watching the approach here. Oops, there we go. So this is what we're talking about with a 2% chance, right? Not fear mongering.
Way off. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
the real, not to fearmonger either, but the real serious question is, whoever has the ability to knock one of those things off track, it's like playing a game of pool. Do we really want the ability to knock those things around in some cosmic game? We don't have to go all the way there today, though.
Right. I totally agree, Mike.
Let's not go all the way there today. Let's talk about Mike's new book.
Yeah, we will. And I just, the last thing I want to show quick before we get into that is just to look at, and this, I'm going to relate this to Mike's book. But this is the asteroid watch. These are the 5 ones that are closest to, that are going to make the closest passes to Earth in the next, few days. And we talk about resonance and celestial bodies with vibration and stuff. Imagine the symphony that's going on here that's beyond our perception, or just beyond the reach of our instruments. And so I just wanted to show that quickly as we lead into Mike's new book coming out, or that's already come out on February 1st, UFO Symphonic. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I just want to ask, just to lead off, you've written several books, you do a nice job of working with both speculative fiction and nonfiction. How did you choose your style of writing for this particular book? I don't know if you froze on me or not.
Terrible time for the internet to freeze right there.
Yep, right.
It had to freeze.
Sorry, I think I got lost for a second.
Yeah, did you hear my question?
I did. Yeah, so I think, and that's a great question. I think that when I get interested in a subject, I like to imbibe a lot of material about it. And then what I try to do is it's interesting and fascinating for me, and I hope that it makes it readable and palpable for other people, is to distill these facts that I'm reading and then put it into some kind of narrative form. Like as a journalist, you do a lot of that. You go to a talk genre, and then you try to like weave in facts and history, but also keeping the narrative flow. And I find that kind of a fun challenge. I've done that a bunch, and you learn a lot. So I'm kind of like a student. The pilage of books that accumulates reflects, if only I could keep all of that in my noggin. But that's something I like to play with. Is sometimes I'm writing just pure fiction, or it's fiction that has it may have components of, there may be true components like memoirish aspects, but I don't want to be moored into just writing like I'm just writing only fiction that unless it's a journalism piece, then you have to stick to that. You don't want to be misleading about facts, and I could be wrong about something.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that especially for UFO Symphonic, I wanted to. It's a lot of speculation in that book. So I'm drawing from musicology, anthropology, cosmology. There's a lot of science in the book, Jungian psychology, and sort of drawing from these different sources to, in a way, to educate myself, to be thorough in the investigation, to entertain myself, and hopefully to deliver something of value and interest to the reader. But I wanted to make sure that it had a personal touch, that it sounded like a person talking, not a Wikipedia article. It's very important too that I wanted to have experiencer accounts. So mixed throughout the the chapters are individual accounts of. The prompt question was, can you tell me something that relates the phenomena? And when I say the phenomena, it's not just UFOs. It could be, apparition or out of body experience.
Out
It
of
could
body,
be
lucid
right,
dream.
exactly. And can you relate that to music? What I learned as I was doing the project is it wasn't just music, it was sound. I had to include sound. And like you guys have been talking here, the universe is crackling with sound. Our oceans are, there's sounds of just coming from all of the sources. There are frequencies that are occurring from rocks, from the aquatic life, from the corals, from just everything kind of jangling, and the objects and the detritus, the dead leaves or fauna, flora. All of this is kind of crackling and beaming and booming with sound. And I found that really interesting. And I had mentioned to Dave when you were saying something about the sun that even rocks emit frequencies. So the whole world, every object is emitting a frequency. I'll take a pause then.
I found out that my Toyota cars, it's around the sound of a low D. Like if I listen to a really loud guitar song that's in drop D tuning, the doors start to rumble, they resonate and vibrate. Then I noticed that my air conditioner unit, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the air conditioner and the dryer in the same sort of closet area, just south of an E flat, kind of like that Eddie Van Halen style tuning. Really,
That's
really good,
interesting.
really good.
Yeah, I mean, you got to hit a note, so there are a limited amount of notes. I mean, there are 12 notes, but there's variations of that.
Hertz is what we can measure.
But
It's just, yeah.
Right. They say that people ask me, well, what is, have you looked at the frequencies did you examine that? They say that 440 hertz is supposed to be, it's the frequency assigned to the note A above middle C. And supposedly
Arbitrary.
it's, because it's different cultures hear music differently. So there's some people believe that 432 hertz is like a naturally harmonious and it's beneficial, but different cultures hear those things differently. Like minors, what we would call a minor key to some cultures, minor is typically associated with sad.
Yeah.
To some cultures that's not true. And so it's not absolute. That being said, there's something interesting that it produces an emotion at all, that it has an effect on our consciousness.
I think
one thing go ahead, please. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think one of the reasons indigenous music is so fascinating is they have no concept of the Western. I mean, obviously Heinrich Hertz helped us understand electromagnetics, and that's why we're counting frequency, like cycles per second. But they have no concept of all that central tuning, the 12-tone system, box chorales, all the rules for music composition. They're more in tune with a natural type of harmonics, the memory, the spoken language of their past, the spoken mythologies of their past. So I find that really fascinating to look into. We have so much bias, which Bach wrote a beautiful system. Bach has a great system to help explain how music works in the Western world, but it's kind of arbitrary. You kind of have to take a basis, and he took a good one.
Yeah, it's different cultures and people contribute a piece, like in science, like we were talking. What's also interesting is in indigenous music, and when I say that, I don't mean this like monolithically. I'm just saying in some of the indigenous music I've heard, the importance of chant and rhythm and repetition, and that kind of thing. And it's trance-inducing. It basically puts you in a kind of a hypnagogic state that opens up your channels for all kinds of experiences, out of body experiences, encounter experiences. I was listening today to Engaging the Phenomenon. James Iandoli has a show it's really great. And he had on, I don't remember the guy's name, Shane something. And he was saying that he uses HemiSync. So this is someone that does remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses HemiSync, which I explored in the book. And HemiSync is you put on a headset and you have two frequencies occurring, but they're different frequencies occurring in each ear.
Yep.
And what this does is it creates a kind of warble effect. And it puts you in this dream state, kind of this pre-dream state, hypnagogic state, that can then evolve into, basically journey experiences. And what this guy Shane was saying is that he'd been doing this for a long time.
Yep.
He worked for the military. He was a kind of he worked for special operations.
Oh yeah.
He can kind of get to that state now without doing that. So he can get to that state where now he's kind of open channels and he's able to communicate with non-human intelligence and have very, very vivid experiences. I think that's fascinating.
History, Myths, and Legends says Bach was one of initiates that composed specific compositions to specific churches that directly affected and activated its functionality. Yeah.
The old Kapellmeister.
That's right.
I mean, Bach is just amazing. He was busy kind of chipping away at making music basically for Sunday masses. So he wrote music for, they would pay him in like beer and cheese, and food and stuff. And I like that they paid him in beer though, like barrels of beer.
And cheese. That sounds good too.
Yeah. His diet didn't sound great though. Like, dried meat, salt, beer,
Hey,
tons of cheese.
Sounds like classic American diet. Let's.
Oh, it does, yeah. It's like that's how Mickey D started.
Yeah, almost. If there was a McDonald's back then, it's like, here, have a wheel of cheese, a barrel of ale, and a big thing of meat, and that was about as close as you could get at the time.
Certainly comes from somewhere. That's true. Yeah, and I mean, I love Bach as much as I love any kind of music, and Bach can take you on a journey. So when I went about this book, I went from the very, I would say, prosaic stories. They're, music it's a transport system.
Mm-hmm.
It can take you back in time, but I also think, and Mike, you had said, I didn't hear David, if you had said that you were reading the introduction parts. And what I think is one of the most powerful things about music is the symbolic nature of it. So it's not, music is, it's deliteralized. Mm-hmm. And it kind of takes you out of words. Of course, there are words to music, and not to devalue that, but just pure tone has a very powerful impact on your consciousness.
Yes.
Even the mantras. I read this book by, I think it's John Blofeld. He wrote a book called Mantra. And what he said is, it's not the word of the mantra. It's actually the tone. Mm-hmm. Because when you get caught up in the word, now you're in a word and you have an association. And a tone doesn't have an association. And if you've noticed that when people there's a lot of experiences people have with, like, say, strange letterings.
Yep.
Strange symbols, glyphs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And music is of that kind of order. And I think that there's something in music that is communicated, and it's happening all the time. And I guess it depends on how much we want to plumb that depth.
Yep.
For instance, bird song. I talk about this all the time. We've actually just begun to get birds here. So I'm in New York City, and you can hear, it's audible. Now there's more types of bird sounds. There's different kinds of bird song. And I kind of feel that there's something intelligent, highly intelligent being communicated that we're not hearing, we're not listening to.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're caught up in our own, kind of worlds and stuff. I'm sorry, Dave.
That's okay. And I agree. Over COVID, when everything slowed down, I never really paid a whole lot of attention to birds before, but all of a sudden during COVID, I was like, everything was so quiet. I was standing in my backyard, and next thing you know, I'm like aware of like this symphony, for lack of a better word, in my backyard every day. And now it's something that I look forward to, that I never, it makes me feel connected to the universe and to just my environment, just paying attention. They're communicating something to me. I mean, it's not in words, like it's not in English, but they're communicating something to me, and I'm definitely hearing it. And it's definitely having a vibrational effect on my mood and everything if I stop, take a moment to listen, I wanted to ask, like, your book is, it's described as like many voices, like forming one, like a narrative, right? Of this sort of experience or symphony, for lack of a better word. And so the idea that like that music is in sound is highly complex communication, serving as a modality for contact with other entities and dimensions. So I wanted to ask about that in relation to the title, because for me, Mike and I follow the UFO phenomenon very closely, and for us, it's not news that the phenomenon itself is related to consciousness and some form of human psychic ability. This is what's coming out in the News Nation reports with Jake Barber and that kind of thing. But so it seems like very good timing to actually use to connect these two. Was that on purpose, or did it just happen to happen in that time? I think we lost him again.
That always happens right after we hand it over. This is too bad.
Right. It always happens right after I ask a question. Thanks for everyone tuning in. If you're listening, it looks like we got 64 people.
Yeah, this is great.
Thanks for joining. I think hopefully there's some new faces in the chat. We've got a new subscriber even just a few minutes ago. So thank you so much, whoever that was.
That's probably Mike back.
Let's bring him back in.
Yeah, and you're in it twice. I've never seen this.
Yeah, that's weird.
Welcome back. There we go.
Well, weird. So did you catch my question?
You asked about, it was a great question. So about the title UFO Symphonic and what I was trying to play with.
And the timing, with I was asking about the timing with the Jake Barber interview and people starting to connect the phenomenon to psychic abilities and consciousness and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting stuff. I think what's happening is it's becoming more popularized. So people like Jacques Vallée and even Jung said that there's a psychic component to this thing. And some people feel that there's both a psychic, because you do have footprint, you have radar and other kind of instrument recordings, you have observation, you have witness experience. So there is a physical component. I mean, there's sometimes where people's lawns are, they're charred from something. There's an energy that burns their face. Some people have implants. Whitley Strieber says, that he has an implant in his ear. And then there's this other psychic component, and that's the tricky one, because that's the one that is, we as a culture, we want we're sort of trained to think science is powerful. There's no doubt, and I'm a very pro-science person. Look at what science is able to do. I mean, it's able to have us connect on this call. Okay, my call dropped, but whatever. We can make these incredible medical advancements. We can do all these incredible things with the application of technology. But technology doesn't necessarily tell you about life. And I think what the UFO phenomena shows us is that the phenomena is tricky. It's elusive. And we don't know why. And I mean, I have my suspicions and I can offer speculations. I think it has something to do with consciousness, in the sense that we only can perceive things through consciousness. I mean, we could record things. I can record things with a machine, But don't forget, a human created that machine. A human designed that system. A human is reading that data from whatever output. So it's always, the interface is consciousness. And I think that we're beginning more and more to understand that, for instance, consciousness subjectivity is required to do experiments at the quantum level.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do an experiment, the outcome is influenced by the observer. So there's this tricky, essential component of definitely of experience, but even of the universe itself. Now, to go back to your question on symphonic, so I was playing with this notion of polyphonic. So polyphonic means many voices. So Palestrina during the Renaissance, they say that he kind of saved music. He wrote these polyphonic. They had come from the north of Europe. The notion of having more than one voice. So as opposed to monophonic or like Gregorian chants, polyphonic you have different melodies that combine together to make like a chord in a sense. And so the theme of the book is many voices. So it has other people's experiences, not just my experiences. And they all kind of come together. I was hoping, even the structure of the chapters, the credo, there's different parts to it that are structured to reflect playfully what the structure of a polyphonic symphony would be like. So I was trying to create this idea that the universe it's more like a song than a machine. But just to go back to your question, Dave, this notion of the psychic aspect. I listened to Jake Barber's interviews. So interesting, so fascinating. And, the government has long been studying. They've been doing studies on these things, for, I don't know, 75
You mentioned
years,
Robert
a long
Monroe,
time.
who founded the Monroe Institute. Well, most of their funding came from the Defense Department. It was being used for intelligence initiatives back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, before people knew about it, when it was still very woo-woo. But now people like Joseph McMoneagle have come out and published their biographies. It's out there for anybody to read. This is a well-researched, well-corroborated topic.
Right, exactly. And so Robert Monroe developed with other people the hemisync technology I was talking about. I think Robert Monroe was kind of like a business guy, and he was a communications person. Yep. But he had this lab, he had this, he started to get very interested in experimenting with things. And they found that when you have those two frequencies, what's interesting, guys, is that it creates this dream effect. And it also enables things like remote viewing. And then you have encounter experiences. So what Robert Monroe is describing in Journeys, I forget the name of the book. I have a few of his books.
Journeys Out of Body.
Is that Journeys Out of Body. And he describes that he was encountering this being that was a kind of a wise but trickstery being, and he would, when he would come back, the being would be there. So he'd go back into that state, and the being would have kind of advice to humankind. Take care of the planet. Stop having these fiefdoms and fighting each other. It's kind of like what we hear when people have encounter experiences. Yep. And I have lots of friends that have done it as well. Have gone to the Monroe Institute. I've done something called the Triad Mind. Yes. And the guy who developed that worked with Robert Monroe. Yeah. There's something. What I found is that there's music as music, which has communication and knowledge. Right? There's just music as knowledge. When we hear something, there's culture being communicated.
It's the language.
But then there's music as sound. Right. There's the language, and no one can play the Delta blues like they were able to play it back then. Yep. You just can't do it. You don't have that touch. I play the blues, I play Delta blues. I don't have that touch. It's ineffable, whatever that was. but there's something in the sound itself that's transportive. And because it's not literal, it has this ability to, it's almost like if we can tune in to the right thing, we can go somewhere else. I don't think it's spaceships that's going to get us, across the galaxies. I think it's in here.
Yep.
It's somehow psychic, and it's these psi capabilities, psionics they call it now, that I think are the real tools of communication.
Yep.
And if you want to call it transportation.
Mm. Yeah. So you mentioned symbolic language, the symbolic language of music in the book, interfacing with a collective unconscious. Can you give us like an example from the book, like that you think illustrates that the most?
It's a great question. So I think that maybe if I can just riff on the answer, I think that the collective unconscious, there's like the personal unconscious. So there's our own personal experience of it. It's sort of like if you think of a body of water and there are ripples, right? And our consciousness is ripples on that water. But consciousness, the larger consciousness, is the entire body of water. I think what we do is we, through different means, can tap into that collective unconscious, where there are archetypes that are beyond, they're transpersonal, as Jung would say. But they seem to be cross-cultural. They seem to be something that you look at the hero's journey. It seems to be something, the rebirth, the death and rebirth. These are kind of themes that occur, and it's cross cultures. So there's something that we can get access to the collective unconscious in different ways. Dreaming is one way. Poetry kind of gets us there.
I feel like even
but music
going
really,
to a live performance, like at a giant concert or something, will do it too, right? Yeah,
sure. I mean, even like
some of that music was designed to be listened to at the highest possible volume, because the truth is all your ear is doing is detecting vibrations in the air, and when the vibrations in the air are big enough, your entire body will begin to resonate. So that's why it's important to go to loud rock concerts where your hair literally stands on end and you can feel the hair standing out from your body when you hit those right type of resonances. It's a magical experience.
I just think about how connected I feel to, like, 100,000 people in a giant stadium when a band I like is playing, right? Like, it's just this feeling of like it's hard for me to describe, but it definitely is. Yeah, the reason why it's hard for me to describe, I think, was a cool concept you mentioned earlier, that music is deliteral. Is that the word to use? Deliteral? Or
deliteralize. Yeah.
So it's why I'm having a hard time even describing it, because it's just this. I know I'm connected to everyone, and we're all sharing the same experience. That's the only crappy human words I have to explain it. I just wanted to respond to Piano and Dante about the link to the book. We're going to put all the links to Mike's information in the description, to the book, to his website, which we're going to show in a little bit, and anything else, as well as his Instagram page and all that stuff. So you guys will be able to find him through that.
Can I rewind a little bit and ask about something we talked about earlier? Before you even have rhythm, melody, and harmony, you've got tones. And a few weeks ago, we talked with Jason Quitt on the podcast, and we talked about the origins of like the blessing of the meal and the intention that goes into the preparation of food and the intention that you set before and as you consume food. And he talked about the sound that you make when you eat a candy bar. And was I reading in your book earlier today about other primates, gorillas also doing the same type of thing while they consume food?
Yeah, they have, like, they call them like favorite food songs. So gorillas will go, and they, they're sort of making humming sounds in a way. And there are primates that I think they're geladas or geladas, I don't know how you pronounce it, that have more complex vocal kind of time recall and response, and they duet. So they'll kind of they'll back and forth. They're kind of speaking. Even birds do it. When you hear birds, I read Jennifer Ackerman's books. I highly recommend her books on the genius of birds, and she's just super interesting. And Dave, you said that you go out and you listen to birds now, and when you read her stuff, she's eloquent, she's poetic, and super knowledgeable.
What was her name again?
Jennifer Ackerman.
Make sure I got it.
The Genius of Birds and the Bird Way or something, I think
Very
it's
cool.
called.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, cool, interesting. You'll hear a bird, tweeting, making song, and sometimes, not always, it's actually two birds, but the response, the call and response, is so finely tuned, it sounds like one. So it's, and when I hear that, I think, is that physics? Are they just giving us the instructions of how to build a time machine?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I often think about similar, like with the language of whales. I don't know a whole lot about it personally. I'm not going to bro science you guys about it, but like from understand, it's far more complex than we think we even understand, and it's very, instead of quick, it's very long and drawn out, almost like on the Lord of the Rings, the tree ants and Treebeard and all those guys communicated very slowly. Whales do the same thing,
Right.
But they could be telling us some shit it would be pretty useful to us too, and we just don't know what they're saying.
I kind of think that it's a first level, just paying attention to the terrestrial world, to the life on this planet, is like a first level. It's for us, meat-brained creatures to graduate from our own egocentric kind of worlds to realize you are the earth. I mean, you are made of soil and water and rain and everything you consume. Glucose comes from, it's made by the sun, and it basically powers plants. And our brains are made of, wouldn't be possible. The communications our neurons have wouldn't be possible without glucose. So it's like where our brains are fed by plants that are fed by the sun. And it's obvious, and we all know this, but we fall out of awareness of this readily. And how does it relate to the UFO phenomena? I think the UFO phenomena is a calling. It's like a knock on the door. And it doesn't come back in a literal way. It doesn't say, I am here, I am from this planet over here, and you are. It's basically, in a way, I don't want to say a test, but because it just might be us. And I don't know, it could just be some reflection of consciousness. It could be some deeper collective unconsciousness that's calling to us to wake up out of our dreams. Because we're constantly consumed in our stories, and all of us. I mean, I am. Yeah.
What do you think of Jacques Vallée's hypothesis that it's some sort of control system or control mechanism that is continuously forming little bump tests? That's what you do if you're trying to analyze the dynamic system and you don't fully understand. You do a little bump test from place to place and observe what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I know that of his work, and I guess anything's possible. That it sounds a little negative because now we sound like animals in a laboratory,
right?
And which is possible. And so, you know what? Maybe that's true. We don't know. And Vallée is a lot smarter than I am, that's for sure. And he's been at this a much longer time. So, Jacques, if you're listening, I'm sorry, bud.
Come on the show. A, if you're listening, come on the show. And B,
right, exactly.
What I like most about his approach and what I've learned from Jacques Vallée and how to analyze data, you've got to be willing to listen to 100% of the information that people give you. And if you choose to do so, throw out 99.9% of it and hold on to the tiniest bit that you think is valid and file it away. File it all separately, but still be willing to listen. If you're not willing to listen, you're not being a scientist. Thanks, Jacques.
Right. And Jacques Wood is very, very, like you said, Mike, very keen on making sure, get that data, write that down, record that data. I think Jeff Kripal does a good job of his
Yes.
expressions, keep everything on the table, because we just don't know. And you have a lot of people, and I'm not criticizing them, but it sounds like I'm criticizing them, but you kind of run to conclusions. And I think it's so premature. We're at such a nascent stage. And maybe for the first time, there's this in popular culture, it's being taken seriously in a slightly different way. Not that ETs, I mean, you still get the giggles and the laughs and the kind of like antenna things and the tinfoil, and I don't mind being made fun of. I don't care. But that's a distraction from the deeper questions.
Mhm.
We talked about, I mentioned like the scope of the universe, the scope of our galaxy, the size, the magnitude. Meanwhile, scientists say that there are, dimensions suffusing this one right here. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, we can look out that telescope. I think, to the spirit of what you said, Mike, we need to look everywhere. We need to look at what's right around us, the birds, the trees that are right here, the ones that we put in New York City, we put them in little square prisons, and there's all kinds of chemicals leaking on them, and people throw garbage, on them. It's sort of like we haven't even to begin to think bigger. I think we need to think locally, even have appreciation
Yep.
for the sacredness of what's here and now.
Yes. Connect with the people that are near to you. Break bread together, share food together, have fellowship together. It's super important in our communities.
We've been learning that a lot with
Exactly.
just with other people. That seems to be a theme that comes on in our interviews typically. Shout out to Bonnie Tarwaters, whose interview's coming out in a few weeks. I wanted to address Piano and Dante's question here, or just statement in general. She says she's not all into the UFO stuff yet. She's open to it, but her theory is it's mostly military work. And I guess my question to you, Mike, is, obviously some of the phenomenon is the U.S. government, like at least some percentage of it is the government. Probably, that would be my assumption.
Mhm.
What would you say to people who are, within that frame of mind of, oh, it's woo, most of this is woo woo. It's just all the government messing with us, and that kind of thing.
Well, I guess to that point is this has been occurring since time immemorial. I mean, you go back to cave, dwellings, cave drawings and in different cultures.
Yeah.
So, and Jacques Vallée writes about that in Passport to Magonia. I think that what happens is in mainstream culture, it gets caught up into a military thing, into a military conversation. I mean, you have what I would say that I personally mostly ignore that stuff. And one thing that caught my attention, just because of the gravity of it, is the 2017 New York Times article that
Right.
the sightings of the Tic Tac, and you had radar data, and you had sightings, and you had objects moving 80,000 miles in 3 seconds. But one thing that I want to say is that there was also a psychic component to that. So there's something called a cap point. And a cap point is when pilots go out, they have a kind of agreed upon zone. It's like something only they know, and it's different for every flight mission. It's like what a football team will say. You have codes. When this happens, go there. And the pilot was seeing the Tic Tac object, and it was doing like it was here, and it moved 80,000 miles, like it zipped away in seconds, and then it went into the cap point. And he said, "Wow, it's messing with me." Now, the thing that I'm trying to say here is that unfortunately, it gets framed in military language. I mean, you have the military out there; they have technology, they're observing things. and then it gets kind of politicized. So you see Congress talking about how do we protect our skies. So you have objects that are moving at 80,000 miles an hour that seem to disappear, that can go into the water. Flash. I mean, guys, what do you have to protect ourselves from this? So there's a kind of, to me, the real question should be, there are things that occur undeniably. Let's investigate them. Let's investigate them with an open mind to questioning the reality we think we possess or we understand fully. And even just the underlying philosophical, like we live we all have to go to work. We all have to make a living. We all have to make sacrifices and do things we don't like to do. And it's life, right? That's a part of it. But there's also this bigger, broader thing of maybe not being so attached to our own self-aggrandizement, our own ego concerns, to have compassion for other people, to be less, clinging on to our own precious, wonderful ideas, to listen to each other. I think that's more of the message. That's the message I'm interested in. I'm not interested in the fear-mongering message that is spun by the military, and it captures people's attention. It's very hard to say to someone, well, there are things, that phenomena occur that we don't understand. Not only do we not understand it, it seems to have a psychic component that is elusive and is intentionally elusive. I mean, people are going to go, what does that mean? I don't know where to begin.
Yeah, I think so. That the recent News Nation with Jake Barber was really the first time that idea was presented in a mainstream court, and it was honestly rejected mainstream. A lot of people were like, "Wow, that's way too much for me." You took that way too far.
And ironically, I think it was also kind of shot down on the UFO side of things because everyone said we already knew that. That's nothing new.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of contention even in the UFO community. You have like some there's the nuts and bolts kind of folks, and then there's I think there's room for both, and I think we don't have to fight amongst each other. I think taking a step back, keeping all things on the table, realizing that our science, our tools, the paradigms we use to examine these things are limited, and maybe we can learn from them. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I think in the book, in UFO Symphonic, it's more about questions and speculations. I've tried to avoid saying anything categorically. Making kind of this just.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the book actually. So like if there was like one thing you wanted readers to take away in terms of the perception of music, UFOs, and how the two intersect, like what would that be?
Music is a contact modality that is non-literal and symbolic, and has the power to music and sound, and has the power to take us to perhaps anywhere, and to help us communicate with, maybe it's some deeper aspect of who we are. Maybe the deeper we go is where we find, a population of other intelligences. That's speculation.
Yeah.
But that's really the message of the book. I mean, if I can make an anecdote,
sure.
In my body and in yours and all of us, there is more not me, biota, bacteria, fungi. There's more not me than there is my DNA. I'm a host for things that aren't me. More than that it's my own DNA. And so we share this universe. We share it with just in our beings. We share it with plants and animals, and we share it with other intelligences and beings and sentiences. That's really that's the message of the book is listen. And it's not like I'm a master at it. I broke my arm. I said, that's a great lesson in humility. It's a great lesson in, okay, buddy, are you listening? Slow down. Take a deep breath. Can you bear the pain? Are you, No, it's hard. Life is hard.
Yeah. And so music being a contact modality to, spirituality, to our
Mhm.
deeper selves. Um, you know, there's certain times in my life where I'm listening to music and it's not hitting right. And then certain times I can just lock in and listen to music all night. And I feel it in my body, and I feel it in my heart, and I feel it in my spirit. And you in the book, you cover like a bunch of different genres of music and how that like Renaissance to rock and roll. And I think that goes to what you're saying as it being a universal thing that connects us all, and it connects us to possibly what else there may be that we don't know of yet.
Absolutely. I mean, we do music. We don't know why we do it. It's interesting. Watch someone on a video doing music, and you see the faces, the emotions. It looks like
It looks like
it's
they're
like everything.
possessed from something, from
Yeah.
something else. Like I was talking about this the other day because especially in certain live performances and stuff like that, like there's a Canadian band called the Tragically Hip. Shout out to Gord who passed away. But if you haven't heard of the Tragically Hip, Gord was an outstanding performer. But he would be coming from through his body, whether it was coming from the ground or somewhere else, but it would just be the music and the lyrics just go straight through his body, and he would be exhausted afterwards. And I do feel like you're witnessing him as a transceiver of sorts or receiver of sorts, and he's just tuned in. And I wish I had that ability myself, and I'm really not envious, but really admire people who are able to tune into that channel of the universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a Sufi mystic, or in some
Yeah.
cultures, a musician is looked at as a doctor. There's a chapter, about an African musician and his training in drumming, and he's basically called for very specific reasons, for healing, for ceremonies, and his music is to uh, encourage and court certain phenomena. So yeah, completely agree with you. We don't know why we do it. It's bigger than we are. It's an it's it, an, it's been explored, but there's so much to be still known, I think.
Have you ever come across, either of you guys, somebody who's like, nah, I don't really like music?
Yes, I'm always
Now,
perplexed. I'm like, what?
it's
Baffled,
rare, but yeah.
suspicious, perhaps, admittably. I've heard that music is actually one of the few things that mankind is good at. I mean, we've kind of made a mess of the planet, and hopefully we'll get out of it. But we're good at music, I hear.
I definitely think it's
Right.
one of the things that separates us from most of the other species on the planet is our ability to create art in an abstract way. But what's interesting is, like you were saying, birds, whales, they're all, everything's singing, right? Rocks, the rocks under our feet are singing. What are your thoughts on? This is a large question, but the universe in string theory is vibrating strings. Does that that probably lends a lot of credence to your books and the stuff you talk about in your books, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it seems that certain people too they have a high vibrancy, and even if you do certain practices, so in Tibetan mysticism, through practices, esoteric practices, people, according to what the lore that's been written down, people can disappear. They can levitate. They can bilocate, be in two places at once.
Bilocating, yep.
Yeah, so there's the thing of people who are able to, they're resonating at a very high frequency, and you'll have encounter experiences that people who felt the energy, the heat, they may even come back with burn marks on their face. So there's something energetically involved in all of this. That's a whole other. There have been books written about that. I didn't want to go down that path only. I wanted to incorporate it. but I think, there's probably books to be written just on that topic alone. I think all I've done is take a whole hodgepodge, and hopefully other people take individual parts of it and carry it forward.
Mhm.
I love books like that, and that's also kind of what our show is. It's a hodgepodge of all the fascinating things that me and Dave are interested in, but don't have time to become experts on. So we bring in guys like you that have written at least an entire book about these things.
Yeah, and actually,
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And on your other interview I listened to this morning, you mentioned that you you're always writing. Like you're on to the next thing usually. Now your book just came out February 1st, and so did you take a break, or are you on to the next thing already?
Well, what happened was I began writing it and thinking about it, and that's usually what I do. Then I fell and broke my arm, and so that it's an impediment. It's hard to write with a broken arm. I was using dictation and stuff, and also you're fatigued when you break a bone. You're fatigued because your body is essentially reconstructing, a limb. So it's taking like all of your. I don't want to say like, please to all the women in the world, but it's like you're creating a baby. Of course, that's a whole other level of vibration and frequency.
Sure.
You are reconstructing the whole mesh of capillaries, arteries, veins, muscle, that tissue, the bone, all of that complex stuff, because it was a pretty bad fall. So I am doing some writing because I'm stubborn. That's just Dave. I can't help it. Even as it's like kind of hurting me, I'm like, clacking away on the keys. But I have a vision of what I'm thinking about, and it really has to do with the UFO as a mystical calling. I hope I didn't let that out, and someone else will pick it up. But Jake Barber has been talking about that. The guy that I saw today, Shane, I forget his last name, on engaging the phenomena. He was talking about that. I'm not the first person to talk about it. I would do it in my way, which is I probably get it wrong and tell it differently, and maybe there's something unique to that.
Not wrong per se, when you're simply trying to share the information that you've gathered and share what you learned with it. And like you said earlier, you're not trying to be particular about the conclusions you draw, so it's hard to be wrong in that case. It's a good approach.
Yeah, I'm sort of being playful. I think my brain is a little bit like things don't line up exactly, and so because of that, what comes in comes out like cheese grated a little differently, and so. If I don't follow directions the right way, then it's going to come out my way.
Almost like you're hearing instruments that are far off and the rhythm gets muffled. You can kind of hear the tones, but the rhythm itself is slightly distorted. You could reinterpret the rhythm at this distance.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a preference between writing short stories or like more long form stuff? I know you've won some awards and stuff for short stories.
Yeah, I like all of the forms. I really do. I like short stories. Very satisfying. It's very satisfying to create. It's like a little machine, and all of the parts work together. I love that, and I do love interviews. Are fun. I enjoy doing interviews, and then capturing it, writing it, and making it into a cohesive narrative. I love this idea of writing in this long form of books too, to kind of meditate on the subject, pull in research. That's a different kind of thing. So I kind of like all of it. I've written poems as well. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a book of poems. I have poems that I've written, poems that have been published, but I'm sort of a writing, junkie, I guess you'd say.
I have two questions that are regarding sound, both kind of the same. Have you ever looked into sound baths or the practice of being in a room with the sound bowls? And then beyond that, like cymatics, using sound to shape matter and move matter. Those are two topics that are really fascinating to me.
Yeah. I have done sound baths. I've gone to sound baths with chimes and sound bowls and gongs, gong yoga I've done. as part of, and it's very much like Robert Monroe. It's the same effect. I mean, I won't say exactly, but it's something similar.
The Emmy
Right.
synchronization starts to kick in.
Well, and it what it does is it takes you to your collective unconscious. It takes you to this other place, and you begin to populate, and you communicate with them, for sure. And I have heard of what was the word you used
Cymatic.
again? The shaping.
And I've mainly seen sort of like plates of sand placed on top of speakers and stuff, and you can see the the wave patterns form.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like maybe the way we would, there's the Kardashev model of how you re-engineer, space-time. Maybe music is a way to do that, is a way to shape, is certainly experience, but who knows, through frequency and what you could do to reconstitute matter.
Yeah.
I leave it to you, Mike, to make that happen. You get the next Nobel.
Yeah.
We'll
You
keep
got it,
looking
Mike.
into it. We'll keep looking into it.
And some more I have a speculative question myself, and you often hear, that, for example, the pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramid and stuff, have it. People speculate that it has, resonance, that has healing frequencies and stuff like that. How much have you looked into, the connection between structural engineering and resonance in ancient structures like that? And do you believe that they had those intentions and purposes with some of those structures?
I would say definitely yes. I mean, think of churches, just even like the architecture and then the music. But, you walk into those structures, they're kind of almost, they're like time machines. You walk into some of the great European churches, or, in America, the churches we have, which aren't as old, but these great Gothic, designs with flying buttresses and, these stained glass windows and these kind of illusions that they play of like depth. Like you look down and you see this geometry kind of, down a space that, is abnormal for a human eye to view, but that has an effect. It puts us in a kind of. I went to York Cathedral last year or the year before. I think it was the year before, and just powerful. The architecture itself was stunning, enough to spellbind you. You're just totally spellbound. And then we went to evensong, so it's basically prayers that are sung, and that was just gorgeous. And even my son was maybe 10 or so at the time, and even he was into it. He was kind of, wow, this is cool. You had this procession of people walk in, young, old, women, man, different voices, harmonies created, this kind of living live thing. It was so magical. I completely believe that, Dave. There's a guy, he actually read the book. He's considered one of the fathers of New Age music, Stephen Halpern. And through some contacts, I got introduced to him, and he got a copy of the book, and he wrote a blurb for the book, by the way. But Stephen Halpern has been making music for healing. He has like music for healing, music for meditation, music for bedtime. And so he, believes that you have certain frequencies, certain megahertz that have certain properties. And I can tell you that he even said when I broke my arm, he said, listen, he gave me some suggestions to help healing.
Yep.
And he said for himself, he'd broken his arm a couple of years ago, and he was using these practices, and he said his doctor was completely surprised at how soon he was healed. And I apologize if there are questions. It's hard for me to see the chat, and I'm sorry. I can't.
They're not. If it's a question, I'll address it. But
cool,
I'm just throwing up comments so that as they go through. But that's one of our That's Piano Andante. I don't know where she's from, but she's here for every one of our shows. She might even be living in Portugal, or I believe. She's friends with Ricardo of History, Myths, and Legends. So if she's still watching, it's late where she is. So thank you so much.
And Perceptions too. I know he's in England, so thank you for hanging in there, guys. I really appreciate that. All of you.
Well, it's a bit late in the show to be opening a new can of worms, but we're talking about vibration. The Schumann resonance, that's another thing. I need to educate myself on the Schumann resonance, the interplay between the frequencies of the Earth and mankind itself, all the human brains on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there's radio happening at frequencies, right? It's going all around us. I mean, there's things that are moving around you and I right now. That's why it's not even hard. It's not hard to think, well, why couldn't there be other dimensions suffusing? I mean, I'm not the scientist to have come up with this, but there's so much more out there.
History, Myths, and Legends, Ricardo there. Yeah, we do. You're right, Mike. We do have very limited observation tools, both biologically and even our extended with our technology. We still are seeing a very short band of reality, you know.
I mean, dogs hear at different frequencies, and other animals certainly and see in different ways.
Different electromagnetic wavelengths.
The three of us likely hear different frequencies in different ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like
that's why it's that's why polyphonic. You know, listen to each other, work together, work for each other, be beneficial to each other. Is my overarching message. When you can, understanding you can't always be that.
Yeah, we're not perfect, but we do need to work together. And music's one way to do that. And so, guys, if you're watching, still check out UFO Symphonic from Mr. Mike Fiorito. Where can we find the book, Mike? Basically everywhere. I'm going to pull up your website right now.
Awesome. Yeah, you can anywhere you can get books, and I don't know if they'll be at Booksy online services because it's
There's Mike right there with a healthy arm at the time.
And please let her.
Star internet connection's cutting out. We're sorry, folks, but we're plugging Mike's new books.
And if you have questions, reach out to me through the website to talk to you, and I'll do my best to respond back to you. Yeah, that's it.
Well, this has been a great show. I'm gonna play the outro song. Thanks for coming on, Mike. It was great to meet you today. We really appreciate talking with you, learning about you.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a great pleasure. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, just one more last word. We really appreciate you, and we really want to support your work. So if you ever have a new book coming out and you want to talk about it, please come. You have an open invite to join the Multiverse and share your stuff. Everyone, like and subscribe, share. We've got some cool stuff coming up. We're going on a road trip with Rebirth of the Word to check out some mound sites. Tomorrow, we're dropping our Humans of the Multiverse episode featuring Mr. R.N. Voigt, author of Spirit in the Sky. Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods and Where in the World We Find Them. And the following week, we're dropping an episode with Dr. Greg Little, featuring who wrote Mound Builders, Edgar Casey's Forgotten Record of Ancient America. We've got a bunch of great guests lined up. So Mike and Dave are going to be going at it hard the next few months. You can find us at Contact in the Desert. We'll be going to that conference. You can also find us at Cosmic Summit 2025 in Greensboro, North Carolina. So hey, join the Multiverse, guys. We really love doing this. Find us all across YouTube, Spotify, Rumble. Let's do it. We appreciate you guys watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, guys.
See you next
Thank
time.
You. See you next time.
Don't go anywhere, Mike.